Hello and welcome back to State of the Division. After a bit of a reprieve, we're back with UFC 288, which is right around the corner. Now, 288 does bring some interesting fights and some fun matchups. Kron Gracie makes his return to the UFC after a very poor decision against Cub Swanson. It'll be interesting how that goes. Drew Dover, Matt Favola fighting this card. I enjoy both those fighters. Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, the main event of Sterling Cejudo. It all looks to be a good deal of fun, as well as some interesting fights on the card that kind of will determine the spacing and futures of some fighters in the UFC. That being said, let's jump right in with the early prelims. And this starts off because of a late scratch. Originally, I was confused why I couldn't find this fight, and then I checked the Vegas odds. Then I went back to the fight card and found it updated, excluding the original two fighters here. Instead, we have 8-3 Joseph Ugly Man Holmes, why, looking to rebound against the 10-3 Claudio Ribeiro. I think I said that right. Holmes is 3 years younger, 4 inches taller, with 3 inches in reach going his way. Now, Holmes is 500 in the UFC so far, 2-2 total. He comes across as a ground-focused finisher, both of his wins coming by submission. He rocks a 3.10 to a 2.73 in striking, and is at least able to be on the feet in this fight so far. Not exactly excelling, not exactly doing terrible, just kind of being there. He doesn't seem to work with multiple takedowns in his fights, taking advantage of his single takedowns to get the finish. Ribeiro is looking for his first non-contender win, so first win really, and seems to be more so the striker with 10 KO wins in his career and a definite tendency to stay on the feet comparing the two fighters. Now, favorite here is Ribeiro, and I'm going to disagree. This fight's obviously close given the unknowns of both fighters and the fact I really don't know about Ribeiro's takedown defense. But I'm going to run with my ground bias here, and I'm going to choose Holmes, the guy who constantly goes for takedowns, gets them, and then finishes off of them. I don't know how he'll do going into super later rounds with someone like Ribeiro, who seems to be the striker that likes going rounds. But in the end, I think Holmes is taking the advantage here, the ability to finish on the ground versus someone whose takedown defense and ground game I don't know. Twelve and 4, Phil No Hype Hawes, or Hayes, looks for the rebound against UFC newcomer, 13 and 1, Ikram Aliskerov. Aliskerov is 4 years younger at 30, an inch taller, but does surrender an inch in reach, so basically nothing different besides age. Now, Hawes is a little hard to describe, but he racks a 5.46 to a 3.49 striking with 3 KOs in the UFC. In addition, he seems like a dynamic striker, able to go beyond punching and keeping the opponent on their toes with the variety he can throw at them. Solid wrestling is also there with a 2.37 takedown average and the consistent ability to rack up ground control time. That being said, it does seem possible to stop his takedowns or mitigate the damage and take the fight back. Aliskerov seems very different, to put it lightly. He has 4 career KO wins, 5 career submission wins, and 4 decision wins. But his last KO TKO came in 2019, so I don't know if it's a game plan or a change in his style. Whichever way it is, he recently has become more of a grinder and a grappler in that regard, keeping you on the ground and wrestling you into oblivion or submitting you with a Kimura. No joke, he's won by Kimura 3 times since 2019. Favorite here is Aliskerov, and Vegas has it close, but I'm going to disagree. I think Aliskerov has a good chance, but Hawes has rocked 100% takedown defense so far, and while that likely won't remain, he likes to hang on the feet and has been shown to survive on the ground. Well, Aliskerov is probably going to be able to take him down. I think the fact he doesn't finish a lot and Hawes likely can survive on the ground, this is going to go 3 rounds, and that gives Hawes the time to work on the feet and maybe piece him up. That's my thought process, at least. Ending off our early prelims, the heavyweights. 5-1 newcomer, Braxton Beautiful Monster Smith, looks to debut with a win against 12-8, Parker Porter. Smith is 5 years younger, an inch shorter, and loses 3 in reach. Smith is another newcomer on this card, and outside the UFC, he's been nothing but a striker and a finisher, so a classic heavyweight. But he has mixed in a head kick KO, which might speak to a slightly more dynamic striking style than other heavyweights currently in the UFC. Porter is the UFC veteran here and comes across as a grinder. He racks a 1.43 takedown average and has shown the ability to get multiple takedowns in his wins and hold for some control time. Striking isn't great at a 6.49 to 6.33, and he lacks the power that a lot of heavyweights seem to have. He also has recently been out-wrestled by a Halton Almeida, which shows that higher-level grapplers and people with a good degree of skill and athleticism can take advantage and control of him. Favorite is Porter, and I'm going to agree. Smith hasn't fought in the UFC, and while Porter has been iffy throughout his fights, I think experience here will help him win, plus the takedown, and he does have somewhat of a heavyweight chin. Starting off our prelims. 16, 2-2, Marina Rodriguez squares off against the 18-3, Vima Karakara. Jandiroba is 2 years younger at 34. Rodriguez takes either 4 or 3 inches in height, but only takes a single inch in reach. Rodriguez is best described as a striking type of grinder with a 4.80 to a 3.05 and the 0.1 takedown average backing it up. In most of her fights, she takes a wide striking lead over her opponent and makes use of the length of the fight to do her work and build that striking lead throughout the rounds. Of course, that does take a fight to decision, which is risky, but she has worked this well. Additionally, she has shown the ability to survive on the ground and either come back in the following rounds or get up quickly as possible. Jandiroba, on the flip side, is a finisher with only one of her UFC wins coming by decision. She rocks a 2.45 to 3.19 and gets power rarely, and I'm talking about one career KO win. Otherwise, she rolls with a 2.31 takedown average and a dangerous submission game, with 2 in the UFC and 13 total in her career. She normally doesn't have a large number of takedowns, so she makes the ones she gets count and can control the ground from a different position. Rodriguez is the favorite, and I'm going to tentatively agree. I think Jandiroba will land a few takedowns, just how this fight's going to go. But Rodriguez has been able to survive takedowns before, and I think she might have enough experience or skill to avoid getting submitted and either get back to the feet or make it to the end of the round and might be able to take the next round or finish the fight there. 13-3, Chaos, the Ox Fighter Williams, or Caitlin Chaos, the Ox Fighter Williams, according to Short Arg, looks to get back to winning against UFC newcomer, 14-1, Rolando the Machine Bedoya. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Bedoya is 3 years younger and inch shorter, giving up 3 in reach. Now, Williams is a finisher with all but one of his UFC wins coming that way. Power is very much his calling card, with a 5 flat to a 4.12 striking average with a stellar takedown average of 0.00. He does have some ground skill with the ability to gain control time off others' takedowns, but he is not the one to initiate them in any real way. He also does seem to have a chin, as all of his UFC losses seem to have him getting hit a decent amount, but making it to the end to lose by decision. Bedoya seems a little different, with 4 KO, 3 submission, and 7 decision wins. Looking at the length of time in the ring, he does seem to go longer in fights, with the majority of his finishes coming in the second or later round. Vegas likes Williams, and I'm going to agree. Chaos has the experience. Chaos seems to have the more dangerous striking, at least on paper, and those two things together make me pick him in this fight. Going later in the fight likely gives more time for Williams to work, and he hasn't really shied away from being able to go longer in fights as well, which makes it pretty even in that regard. 11-3, Kennedy African Savin Neshchukwu, looks for 3 in a row against the 14-7 Devin Brown Bear Clark. I don't know where this comes from. Kennedy is 3 years younger, 5 inches taller, with an additional 8 inches in reach. Kennedy is a thoroughbred finisher with 8 career KO wins and 4 of his 6 UFC wins coming by KO. He has a pretty dynamic striking style with elbows and knees mixed in and rolls with a 4.63 to 4.19, which speaks to a tendency to stand and go at it with people. That being said, he does tend to take the lead in most of his wins, but that doesn't diminish his ability to put it away. Yeah, it does have a 0.74 takedown average, but all 5 of his takedowns came in a bout with Carl Robertson, where he gained 10 minutes of ground control off them. On that note, he can't be taken down and controlled, but he does have the ability to reverse or get back to his feet with relative consistency. Clark is more so a grinder in comparison, rocking a 2.91 to 2.71 on the striking, showing his ground game preference, of which he has a 2.36 takedown average. The striking is good enough in most cases to keep him in a fight, but the highlight obviously is his takedowns and ground control. It is worth noting that his ground control time is a bit all over the place, but those fights could be more so considered outliers than his consistency. Kennedy is the favorite, and I'm inclined to agree here. Clark doesn't tend to give finishes, and grinding in the ring with him gives him more time to work for the KO, to get off the ground, and to do his work there, which, given the judging, might give him the benefit in the end, or might let him get the finish. So in the end, I am going to pick Kennedy kind of based on that. For the last fight of the prelims, and I feel like this really should be on the main card, 26-11-1, Drew Dober tries to keep his streak going against 10-3-1, Matt the Steamroller Frivola. That is Steamroller with an A. Frivola is 2 years younger, 1 inch taller, with a whopping 1 inch in reach. Now, Dober is a swing and bang fighter, and that could honestly end my entire analysis. He rocks a 4.47 to 4.40 in striking and packs a good deal of power with his punches. He's relatively inconsistent in terms of taking the striking lead, with some fights having him up 62 to 37, and others having him down 34 to 73. Either way, he's able to get his power to come forward and get the finish. One weakness I do notice is the 55% takedown average, which I feel some fighters will be able to take advantage of moving forward. Speaking of which, Frivola is a weird fighter to take a look at. He rocks a 3.46, 3.49 in striking, which isn't great, but behind it is some sort of power because his last 2 fights both ended in KO TKO. He does have a ground game where he can stack takedowns and take ground control in order to get to the end and get the win, and that seems to be a majority of his fights, with the power randomly interspersed and throwing off everything you're looking at. Now, Dober is the favorite, and as much as I like Frivola, I'm inclined to agree with that. Dober's dealt with ground fighters before, surviving, getting to the feet, and getting the finish, or getting enough points to win in the end. Frivola's going to have to put on one hell of a show if he wants to win. It's basically going to be putting Dober for almost half round to entire rounds on the ground and not letting him breathe or get time to do damage on the feet. Opening up the main card, 5-1 Kron Gracie looks to rebound against 13-6-1 Charles Jourdain. Jourdain is 7 years younger, but there's even height across both fighters and a single inch in reach favoring Gracie. Gracie's coming off a 4-year gap between his last fight where he decided to fistfight Cub Swanson, but as a whole he's a ground-focused fighter with a dangerous submission game. Striking is not great, which makes the Cub Swanson thing even more confusing, and he relies on getting to the ground and controlling it with his BJJ. Jourdain is coming off a 2-fight losing streak. He looks more like a striker with a 5.84 to 4.56 in striking, and seems to be more so the swarmer instead of the power puncher with all of that. However, he does seem to struggle against takedowns with a 48% takedown defense and multiple fights with 2 or more takedowns against. Favorite is Charles, but this one is close. And in the end, I'm going to go with Kron Gracie under the assumption he won't try to box. Jourdain in his last 2 was taken down multiple times and lost. And Kron, being that ground-focused guy, being the BJJ guy, being the guy who submits on the ground, being the guy who should focus on all that, I imagine he's going to shoot a takedown, and I believe he's skilled enough to get the takedown. I don't know if Jourdain's going to be able to counter this takedown as he hasn't these last 2 fights. 16-0, Movsar Evelev looks to stay perfect against UFC newcomer 20-5 Diego Lopez. Lopez is 1 year younger, 4 or 3 inches taller, and with dead even reach. Evelev is a grinder dominator in the purest sense. He rocks a 4.36 to a 2.79 in striking, and though there are some fights where the striking is close, as within 3 punches, and others where he led by 59, his focus does still seem to be taking the top on takedowns with a 4.93 average, and even when he's taken down, he's able to avoid the worst case scenario. In his fight with Mike Grundy, he was taken down 6 times for only 2 minutes something of ground control. He was again able to get up, and he did end up winning that fight. Now, Lopez also looks to be a ground-focused fighter with 11 career submission wins, and looking at the play-by-play of his Contender Series fight, he was looking for submissions throughout and did an okay job of doing that. I can't speak to his takedown ability, but to be stereotypical of BJJ guys, they don't tend to play off the takedown game a lot. Some submission guys do, but a majority of the BJJ guys I've looked at don't tend to go heavy off submissions. So I don't imagine him having this heavy takedown game. I imagine him probably playing more based on whatever position he ends up in or whatever position he's put into. That being said, I couldn't find the Vegas odds on this, but I'm going to go throw my hat in with Evelev here. I don't have enough to go with Lopez, but if he wants to win, he's going to have to do it on the ground, where I imagine this fight goes. And on the ground, that's where things get tricky, where you have the more dominator kind of wrestler versus the guy who's BJJ and kind of likely plays off the position he's given. That makes it difficult for me, but in the end, Evelev's shown me more. I'm going to go with Evelev. 24-10, Jessica Bate-Estaca Andrade looks for rebound against 16-3-0-1 Xiaonan Fury Yan. Andrade is 2 years younger. Yan takes 4 or 3 in height, because Sure Dog in UFC still can't agree, and a single inch in reach also going her way. Andrade is one of the UFC vets, with her first fight being in 2013, all those many years ago. Like a lot of the women division fighters, seem to be a pretty rounded fighter, with the ability to hang on the feet and go to the ground when needed. Her striking is solid, with a 6.84 to 5.34, and while she can get the finish on the feet, it's not the highlight or her main focus. Her takedown game is also solid, with a 2.64 average and decent control time off those takedowns, like a minute or so each. Yan is more of a striker, with a 5.45 to 3.53 in striking and 0.87 in takedowns. Functional, not her main focus. She does shoot them occasionally, but it seems like a game plan or matchup decision over that consistent threat like Andrade. When it comes to striking, she tends to take these leads and kind of grow them throughout the fight, taking it into the final round and not really getting early finishes. Vegas likes Andrade, but has it close, and I agree with the degree of skepticism. Andrade has the experience and ability to go in different ways to win this fight, but Yan is dangerous, and I'm not counting her out of this in the slightest. I agonized very little over this, but in the end, I won't be surprised to see Yan win, but I think Andrade will take it in the end, probably by decision. For this co-main event, 22-3-0-1, Belal, remember the name, Muhammad, looks to add another name to the resume. Against 22-5, Gilbert Muhammad is 2 years younger, with either even height or an inch advantage going his way, with a single inch of reach also going his way. Now, Belal is perhaps the definition of solid and rounded. He rocks a 4.47 to 3.68 in striking, with the occasional KO power coming out of nowhere. On the other hand, he carries a 2.19 takedown average and the ability to throw submissions with pretty regular effect. More so, he shows up as a grinder and has a control style of fighting, using takedowns to generate chunks of ground control time and solid striking to keep his opponent cautious and on the back foot and just give himself the points in the fight. Burns is similar and also a grinder, but a little less effective with the striking and more inclined to finish. You're rocking a 3.38 to a 3.13 in striking and a 2.16 takedown average. Burns has a good deal of power, and the KO ability is always kind of lurking there if he can get the right shot. Additionally, he's shown some serious durability and the ability to survive on the ground to get back into fights, in addition to a wrestling style of takedowns similar to Belal. Favorite here is Burns by a narrow margin. Out of complete and blatant favoritism, I will agree. This fight feels close, and it likely should be a good one, and I imagine both fighters go in there with wanting to dominate the other. But I like Burns, and the way he fights, I just happen to like it more than I like the way Belal fights. I think this will be one hell of a bout. I imagine Burns would likely be on the ropes more than once, but I'm going to go with Burns here. For the main event, 22-3, Aljamain Funkmaster Sterling looks to stay champ against the 16-2 Henry Triple C Cejudo. Sterling is 3 years younger, 3 inches taller, with 7 in reach going his way. Sterling is the funky kind of fighter, the bad pun was intended, but honestly that's the best way to describe this weird style he kind of uses. He rocks a 4.70 to 2.18 in striking, but only has 2 KO wins in the UFC, and is more well known for his 1.98 takedown average and ability to hold fighters on the ground to generate control time and point punches. He's able to do work on the feet, but the danger of his game seems to come from the takedowns and control time. He also will work the range on his punches really well, kind of using those 7 inches to his advantage. Cejudo is, or was, a little similar, with a 3.92 to 2.77 in striking and a 2.12 takedown average. Obviously, the striking numbers-wise is a little worse, but you also see Cejudo calling on the power a little more to put fighters away. His takedown game is also a little more wrestling than Sterling, if I'm going to describe it in some way. Kind of a more traditional takedown, get on top style than Sterling's backpack and control from the back. So this results in less ground control time, but lets him disrupt a little more and put himself in positions to land good shots on opponents getting up off the ground. Now, Vegas has this basically dead even, leading slightly towards Cejudo, and I imagine that's based more on reputation. I am close to agreeing, just because can also buy into the hype, but I feel that Sterling should be able to do enough to keep the belt. We've seen him kind of tie fighters up on the ground, make use of his reach on the feet, and put up decent striking performances against many fighters. Do I think Cejudo can get in there and use power? Yes, but I think Sterling has faced other power punchers, and while they're not as good as, or maybe can't be considered as good as Cejudo, I imagine Sterling likely has a game plan in mind that will benefit him well. I can easily imagine this fight ending in the second or going all 5 rounds, but in the end, I think it'll go Sterling's way, just based on, I think, his camp and time will benefit him. So in the end, that's UFC 288, and as you can see, there's some pretty interesting implications and fights going on there. I'm not sure who's going to win them all. You've obviously heard my picks, but I'm also, I think, sitting about a little under 500 total for my predictions. That being said, leave your opinions in the comments, like the video, tell me what you want fixed, and enjoy the fight.